Mrs. Morris and the Ghost by Traci Wilton. Chapter 10. Following the conversation with Jack's college girlfriend, Charlene decided to kill two birds with one stone and Googled antique shops down by Old Salem Hall. Amelia's nudge about the pride folks had in their ancestry had her curious. How many generations back could Jack count? Vintage Treasures had excellent reviews and was close enough that she could walk over to the hall afterward. Charlene parked and went inside the shop, blasted with that musty smell common to old stores. It was aptly named, she thought, as she made her way through the aisles. With a little time and more money, she could have a heyday in this store. Since the knobs were heavy, she made her way to the counter before shopping. "Good morning," she said cheerfully to the middle-aged man behind the counter. He wore a gray vest that didn't quite button around his plump stomach, a blue shirt, and gray pants. He peered over half-framed spectacles and glanced at the plastic container she carried. "Good day to you, ma'am. What may I do for you?" She took off the lid to show him the old knobs. "I just bought an estate on Crown Point Road, and the place dates back to the late 1790s. I found these in a box and wondered if they could be originals." "Well, that would be an interesting find." He picked one up and squinted closely. "They represent the early Regency era, but it's hard to tell an original from a reproduction just by the naked eye. Are you interested in selling these? I could find out for you." "Yes, please do. If they're valuable, I might consider letting them go. I'm Charlene Morris, by the way." She extended her hand. "And I'm opening a B&B next month. I still need to furnish a great many of the rooms." "Nice to meet you. I'm Archie Higgins, proprietor of this shop." "It's quite a place you've got here." She glanced around at the rows and rows of what some might call junk and others treasure. "It would take me hours to pick through all of this. People bring new things in every day." He examined the knobs again, his sharp eyes assessing what they might be worth. He weighed one in the palm of his hand. His knuckles curved around it, and she was reminded of brass knuckles. "Only 5 of them? It should be a set of 6 or 8. Funny that she thought that too. "Like I said, I found it in an old tub." Charlene cradled one in her palm. Could it be used as a weapon? What couldn't be used as a weapon? Jack had contusions consistent with a fall. What if it wasn't a fall, but somebody hitting him, hard? She put the knob onto the box with the others, a tickle at the base of her neck. "If you don't mind, I'll take one to the back room and see if I can authenticate it." He showed her a flash of his stained teeth. "Real hand carvings are uneven and asymmetrical, which these seem to be." His thumb rolled over the dent she noticed. "Great!" She shook off the idea that it might have been used to hurt Jack, which was too big a leap even for her active imagination, and turned toward the shop. "While you're doing that, I'll look around for a mirror over the fireplace in the living room." "We have the larger ones against the far wall. One from the Federal era with a wooden carved eagle on the top, dated 1790. He stepped around the corner. "I'll be back with you in a few minutes." A carved wooden eagle? Charlene left the package on the counter and headed for the wall with ornate brass mirrors. The shop hosted a collection of at least 24, not including the terrifying eagle. But one caught her attention almost immediately, and she imagined it hanging as the centerpiece above the fireplace. Elegant rope beading in a gilt frame about 7 feet long, the length of the mantel, and 5 feet wide. It would most definitely make a statement. Charlene wandered around the packed aisles, hoping to find a telescope that would be close to the correct size, or would do in a pinch. Being a nautical town, there were a few, but nothing matched the stand on her widow's walk. In less than 5 minutes, Archie came back and told her that indeed they were original. "I did find a small chip on one, but it was easy to sand out." He showed her the knob he'd cleaned and the small dent he'd sanded down. "As heavy as they seem, they are fragile due to their age. If you're sure that you don't want them, I can give you $200 for the lot." She rubbed her arms. Too fragile to have been used to bash Jack over the head. Charlene still didn't want them in her house. "I'll take it. You can put it against the cost of the mirror I've pulled out to the side." She gestured back to the statement piece with excitement. Excellent choice. Anything else strike your fancy? I saw you looking at the telescopes. I have a gorgeous view from the Widow's Walk and a sturdy brass stand, but the telescope is gone and I'd like a replacement. The ones you have are way too big. She smiled. If you could find a smaller one, I'd appreciate it, and so would my guests. Sure, I'll keep an eye out. You know that most telescopes, even the antiques, can be adjusted to size? Oh, I didn't realize that, Charlene said. Now what? He must have read the frustration on her face. Tell you what, I'll have the mirror sent over today, he assured her. Might even deliver it myself so I can take a peek at that stand. And the view. Thank you so much. She glanced at her watch. I have a few more errands in town, but will be home no later than... She'd like to meet Shauna Rawlings for lunch, which might push her to later in the day than she thought. Let's say 3 o'clock? Back out on the street, Charlene headed diagonally toward Old Salem Hall, a 2-story brick building still in use since 1816. She went inside. The first floor was an open array of local artists, and she read on a plaque that the original purpose had been a public market. Upstairs on the second floor had been open to public offices and a gathering place. Paintings ranged from the horrific, witches burning in flames, to picturesque landscapes of Salem's bustling wharf. There was a row of shelving that offered brochures on local sites, and she made a note to get her brochures for Charlene's B&B added. She paused to talk to an older woman with a stylish gray bob, 70-ish, sitting behind a long counter. Hi, I'm looking for archives on some of the old-time families in this area. That'll be upstairs, the woman said. Her name tag read Zelda Price. Anyone in particular? The Strathmores? She kept it as a question and decided to keep her ruse of uncovering the history of her house. I just bought the place on Crown Point Road. She smiled. I know the home. Shame it was empty the last few years. I'm glad you bought it. I'm opening a bed and breakfast. Wonderful. Well, the Strathmores have been around at least 100 years. Such a shame about the former owner, with no kids to carry on the family name. She clucked her teeth. I used to teach elementary school, and Jack was in my 3rd grade class. Smart as could be. He could memorize anything, even with his dyslexia. Never saw a kid that determined. Charlene sighed as she imagined an adorable Jack Strathmore as a boy. Was he a handful? Oh no, that wouldn't have been tolerated by his father or his grandfather. The woman tapped the counter with an arthritic finger. But you can see the family tree for yourself upstairs. There are at least 10 families who still live here in Salem that can trace their ancestors back to the first year of settlers. Wow. Okay, thank you. Charlene took the stairs. Walls and walls of thick, leather-bound books lined up the dates clearly written on the bottom of the shelf. There was a section on local families, and she took down a book to read. At a rectangular table. Yep, Strathmores, Bransfords, Flints, Rawlings. Charlene paused with her finger on the name and did a comparison. The Rawlings had been in Salem for 200 years, compared to the Strathmores' 150. Smith, Watts, Murdoch? Charlene returned the book with more reverence for history than what she'd started, her gaze going to the next shelf on families related to the so-called witches burned in Salem. If her hunch about Shauna was correct, she could think of another one to be added. Poor Jack. It was obvious that children were important to him, and Shauna had denied him. Why? And why would she have killed him? To marry Theo, whose family roots went back farther? The idea seemed ridiculous to her, but who knew what could trigger a reason for someone to kill? She pulled her phone from her purse and dialed Shauna's number. Again, to voicemail. Charlene decided to arouse Shauna's interest. This is Charlene Morris, the new owner of your home on Crown Point. I've been experiencing unusual things and now believe it to be haunted. Please call. I'll be at the Cod and Capers, Harborside, until 1. It was 11:30 now. She'd spotted the restaurant before coming in and figured that would be a great meeting place. Having time to kill, she randomly flipped through some pages of old history books, looking at faces and names, hoping to recognize a few of the prominent people during that era. A sketch of the tormented Elijah Bransford from 1692, as witness to the witch trials. Another Bransford, also a mayor, like Amelia's father had been a few years ago. The man from 1850, tall and so thin he looked skeletal, accusing a sinner in court. A grainy picture of Obadiah Flint standing in a field of corn. Not dated, but the pages were yellowed. She was ready to give up finding anything on the Strathmores when she turned another page and an old photo with one of Jack's ancestors came up. It was taken on the harbor, not far from where she stood now. Zachary Jonathan Strathmore. The woman, who she expected to be Mrs. Strathmore, was identified as a young Margaret Flint. An ancestor from Flint's vineyard? How peculiar! The two of them were standing close, neither smiling for the camera. 1890, they didn't do smiles in the old days. Had they all been friends as children, growing up in a clique so tight that Shauna would never get in? No room for outsiders. So how exactly did Charlene think she'd fit in? If she'd learned anything from the research on Shauna, it was that throwing excellent parties wasn't good enough. Leaving the books and their secrets, Charlene waved goodbye to Jack's old teacher, made her way back onto the street, and walked into Cod and Capers to take a seat at the bar. The restaurant was on the edge of the wharf. Nautical decor, grays and blues with nets and painted lobster traps. A perfect touristy place to get a bowl of chowder without breaking the bank. She knew what Shauna looked like, so she'd spot her if she arrived. It was just noon now, the time she should be out of bed. Lazy wench. A cheery red-headed lady from behind the counter came right over and dropped off a menu with a friendly smile. "Hey there! Haven't seen you in here before. Visiting?" "No, new arrival." She offered her hand. "Charlene Morris. I'm opening a B&B next month. Just snooping around town this morning. Hoping to find answers, but Shauna hadn't returned her call. I found a great mirror at the antique store across the street." She pointed to the shop on the corner. "Sharon Turnberry. I'm the manager here. Nice to meet you." She glanced out the window that faced the square. "Vintage treasures. Archie has some really unique finds. I could spend hours there." She picked up the menu. "So, what do you recommend?" "Shrimp tacos are a big hit for lunch, and the crab cake sandwich. But you can't go wrong with anything here. Good salads, and our fish is all fresh." Sharon jerked a thumb at the wharf. "Grilled, deep-fried, or blackened." "Shrimp tacos sound right up my alley." Her stomach rumbled in agreement. "But can we wait on that for a few minutes? I'm meeting someone, I hope." "Sure." Sharon stepped back. "Can I get you something to drink? An iced tea or a local wine?" Charlene decided to treat herself after a productive morning. "Wine, please." "Do you prefer something oaky or light and fruity, like a Pinot Grigio?" "The Pinot sounds perfect." Sharon returned a few minutes later to show the label. A heart-shaped logo of red and white grapes, stamped Salem, Mass. "From Flint's Vineyard." She poured an ounce into Charlene's wineglass. "Let me know if you like it." "I've seen this brand all over." Charlene sampled the wine's crisp, fruity notes and nodded with satisfaction. "It's very good." Sharon topped off her glass. "Tourists usually make a trip to the vineyard. Once I tell them how close it is, we like to support our local businesses, and it works both ways. The owner, Brandy, cuts us a good deal." "Brandy Flint?" "Yes. Do you know her?" There was that name again. "Not yet, but I'd love to meet her." "I'll get her number for you. Tell her I sent you her way." Sharon returned with the Flint Vineyard business card, and as Charlene eyed it, she realized where she'd seen the emblem before. Jack had been wearing a t-shirt with it emblazoned on the front just this morning. Brandy was Jack and Theo's business partner, and another possible suspect in her eyes. Charlene called and left a message for Brandy, then jotted down a few things to do before having her party at the house. Getting the upstairs furnished was priority number one. She needed 3 more bedroom suites, including armoires and 2 smaller wardrobes for the 3rd floor in the single rooms. The party would bring everyone related to Jack into the same room. She'd have all the key players in one place so that she could get Jack's opinion on who might have done what. She'd invite Sam too. Hopefully impress the local businesses she planned on working with so they could talk up her B&B. A win-win. She'd have Jack help her with the guest list and Minnie with the menu. She wrote down flower arrangements on her list to make sure that they were downstairs for the party. Margaret was the manager from Witch's Bloom. Where was Shauna? Ernie texted her that yes, he'd been the one to find the property next to the vineyard and bought it for Jack and Theo. To his knowledge, Theo hadn't sold it again, and as a courtesy, Ernie texted in bold. He'd look up the information on his real estate listings. Theo owned it all. Charlene ordered her tacos and settled in for a solitary lunch. The bar was a mix of locals and visitors, the restaurant doing a healthy business. The noise of conversation and laughter, the activity of people coming and going, was a pleasant distraction from her jumbled thoughts. The touristy town was a gold mine, and she couldn't wait to cash in. Before she could do that, she had to help her handsome ghost move on. Jared would have loved the wharf, the history, and even the statue of Samantha from Bewitched in Salem's town center. They hadn't done any of the touristy things when they'd come for Bryn's wedding, her best friend. They'd been involved in the festivities, getting to know Bryn's husband-to-be, and catching up with friends. Both she and Jared were too wrapped up in their work to stay longer than 3 days. They'd planned on coming back and hadn't done it. She'd learned the hard way not to put off something that was important. Time did not stand still. There was no room in her life for regret, so she made a promise to live fully. Jared would want her to. Charlene paid the bill and waved goodbye to Sharon, who was busy with another table. She'd loved Jared so much that she couldn't understand how Shauna could cheat on Jack. She might not have killed him, but she'd done a mighty fine job of breaking his heart. And for that, Charlene dearly wanted to see Shauna pay.